Hi, and welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast, co-hosted by Abby Fearing, the Badass Breastfeeder, and Dianne Cassidy, IBCLC.
Hey, welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. I'm Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And I'm Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder.
I almost forgot who I was. We are going to talk, now this topic for this week, we have gotten so many questions and requests about. I don't know how we didn't end up doing it sooner, really.
I know. I thought that too. I was like, wait, how have we not done this?
Yeah. So we are going to talk about oversupply, which doesn't that sound like a fantastic thing? You have a ton of milk.
Yeah, I think that's probably why, because we talked about low milk supply.
Yeah.
Which that's the big panic.
Yeah.
But then you figure like, oh, someone's got too much milk. Oh, well, they're lucky.
Right. And that's what everybody, they're lucky if they have, oversupply, blah, blah, blah. Oversupply is not a good problem to have.
No, and it's really hard for people to breastfeed.
It's hard to breastfeed. It's hard for babies. All kinds of problems come up, and it's really uncomfortable, and it's hard to get under control once it's out of control. So this is definitely something that we need to talk about, because I think a lot of things that happen with oversupply, like a lot of the symptoms of oversupply, look like other things too. So it's really important that moms know what they're looking for when they.
What other things do they look like?
So, for example, sometimes you get recurring mastitis with oversupply.
Yeah.
One of the big things that I see is babies being diagnosed with a dairy allergy. Or with reflux dairy allergy because of oversupply. And that is a really common occurrence. And
interesting.
So, babies can be fussy. They're really fussy. They're really gassy. They're uncomfortable. They're
like spitting up and they're like gagging.
Yeah. And they want to feed all the time, and their poop might be green, and, maybe have a trace of blood in it or something like that going on. And a lot of times the doctors will say, oh, it's got to, it must be a dairy issue. Go off dairy. It's an allergy. Your baby's, whatever, allergic to your breast milk, whatever craziness sometimes comes up. And, which I have heard that before. And then that's not what it is. It's because the mom has so much milk that it's causing an imbalance in the way the baby breastfeeds. And that is causing too much foremilk, which makes their system just like digest it so super quickly. It's flying through their system. So it's not really doing anything, and it's irritating the gut, and it's causing green poop because it's not really digesting as well. And then they're hungry an hour later because it's not the hind milk. It's only the foremilk, but they're gaining a ton of weight because they're eating so much and they have so much milk. It is such oh my goodness, these poor babies and the poor mamas, because sometimes these moms are like full all the time and leaking
everywhere. Yeah.
And just so uncomfortable with it that they don't know what to do. And we did have somebody recently send us a message about oversupply, which is why we were like, all right, we really need to talk about oversupply, because it can be really hard. Babies can get really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And so is that the same as overactive letdown? They
pretty much go hand in hand. I mean, I have seen people have overactive letdown without oversupply, but it really does it goes hand in hand. A lot of times you'll have both. Mm-hmm. And that can be hard too, because, then the baby just chokes and gagging and, all this stuff happening. And
that means it's coming out faster than it usually would, or
exactly. The letdown is just like they're opening up the floodgates,
like a waterfall. Yeah.
And the babies are like, oh, and sometimes that can, a lot of babies will, maybe pull off. Some of them can handle it okay. You might see them kind of pause and sputter a little bit. Some will pull off and cry a little bit or cough and then go back on. Some babies will just pull off and not go back on. So it can be very, very anxiety provoking for a mom, because it is really they feel like every time they go to feed their baby cries at them, and they can't, sometimes babies won't comfort nurse if this is happening too, because it's just too much for them. So they just learn how to just nurse and feed, and that's it. No comfort, no nothing. So
and if they, because that's a good way to make more milk, right? Is to be latched on all the time.
Right. Yeah.
And then then you're ending up with a lot of milk. So how does it happen? How do you end up with? Because I never had that problem. I had just enough milk. I never had, I leaked kind of in the beginning, a couple of times when you would. But so how does that happen? Are you born with like oversupply?
I think some women are definitely just have a great supply of milk. Whatever the breast tissue, everything is right where it's supposed to be. And they have this great supply of milk. You have more milk with each baby. So I think if it's like you have more kids, then you just end up having, more each time. But
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Too much stimulation early is a huge problem. That is the biggest factor I see behind oversupply. And that is pumping before 2 or 3 weeks when you don't need to.
Yeah, right. Because a lot of people think, I was actually just talking to somebody online recently who had won a pump on my page. And she was like, oh, my baby's coming soon. I want to get the pump before the baby comes. And I said, well, you might want to hold off a little bit. Well, no, I got to go back to work. So I want to start, right away. And so then, my husband can also feed the baby. And I was trying to convince her to not pump, right away. But there's like a lot of anxiety around that. Like, oh, I got to start pumping right away. Got to start, got to make sure I got a lot of milk. Got to make sure that the freezer is full of milk.
Right. Got to go to work. Somebody else wants to feed. I want to be able to take a break. I got to do it.
And I think people also get scared that they're not going to have enough milk. So it's like, oh, I got to pump too. Got to right from day one, right in between the feedings.
Right.
Which there are no feedings anyway in the beginning. It's just baby's just there.
And if you are stimulating too much, sometimes like in the hospital, if the baby isn't latching well in the hospital, they'll have the mom start pumping in the hospital just for that stimulation. And then moms don't realize that they don't need to keep doing that when they go home. So now baby's feeding well. You're 3-4 days in, baby latching better, feeding well, and they're still pumping.
And so your body's making milk for like 4 babies.
Exactly. Yeah. And I always tell me, like, my first baby, I breastfed 1 baby. My twins, I made enough milk for 2 babies because I was feeding 2 babies. Like there wasn't a question there. And if you're stimulating your body that much, if you're feeding 12 times a day, you're feeding on demand, whatever it is that you're doing, your baby is feeding regularly and feeding fine, and you're pumping, you're going to overproduce. And that is a really hard thing to back up once you've already got it going. And a lot of times I will hear that it comes out of the hospital, that the hospital with good intentions has them start early. And then moms don't have the knowledge behind it of what they're supposed to do once they go home. They don't say like,
don't keep doing this.
Right. Yeah. Or maybe they do, but then, you remember how it is. You get like a zillion people giving you instructions. I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, or you get nobody giving you instructions.
Right.
Like it's just like, here's your baby. Here, we're doing all this stuff. Go home. And then once you're home, you're kind of like, you just don't know what to do.
Right. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I've said to a mom, oh my God, stop pumping. Because it's like, or they'll tell them like, if they're using a nipple shield, oh, you got a nipple shield, you have to pump every time. No, you don't. Like,
I think I feel like this is a really common piece of misinformation is that people think if you're breastfeeding, you need to have a pump.
And you don't.
Like you don't even have to own a pump. The only reason you would ever need to own a pump is if you're going back to work.
Right. If there's a reason, and I tell moms this prenatally, unfortunately, not enough. I don't think a lot of people get prenatal breastfeeding education, really good prenatal breastfeeding education. But I always try to make sure that they know, like, if the baby is feeding well, if you are not separated from your baby doesn't have jaundice, they're under light, your baby's not sick, your baby's with you, latching, you do not need to pump. It's just one more thing to do. Please don't pump for at least the first 2 or 3 weeks. And then after that, you can pump if you want to.
But you don't have to.
No.
And again, you would only need to do that if you're going to be separated from your baby. You don't need it to make a good milk supply.
Absolutely not. And quite honestly, I think physiologically it screws everything up because the baby's supposed to latch and tell your body what it needs. If you're interfering with this, and sometimes it can't be helped if it is a situation where the baby's not with you, but in the very beginning, your body is set up so that your body and the baby communicate with each other and we know what to do. When everything gets thrown out of balance and you're adding other things in and you're doing like that is going to just skew the whole process and your body just doesn't know what to do. Makes too much milk.
A pump is a machine that we invented.
Right.
Breastfeeding happened for thousands and thousands and thousands of years without this pump.
Right. Without the
pump.
And
now we have it, and there's a lot, and now there's this belief that you actually have to have it and have to do it in order to be successful at breastfeeding.
I mean, it's because of going back to work and, a huge, huge part of the workforce is childbearing women. So for that reason, we like to have it. But yeah. And the Affordable Care Act.
Again, but that's the situation where you're separated from your baby.
You're right. You're separated from your baby. The Affordable Care Act is like, okay, we'll give pumps to every mom. And, and part of me is like, that's fantastic because women who are struggling to try to afford a good pump to go back to work, now they don't have to worry about that. But to get a lactation consultant covered, like that's a huge event.
Yeah.
But they'll give a pump away to anybody. So it's frustrating.
That's messed up.
And then you've got these pumps, like it's unbelievable what these pumps will do. I mean, there's ones you don't even have to hold on to anymore. Like you can just stick the cup things in your bra and you've got this little pump thing and nobody will even know. They show these women and these ads in board meetings pumping and nobody knows. And it's like, really?
I think I just posted just a couple hours ago. I posted a picture of, Nicole Phelps, Michael Phelps's wife.
Oh,
I think.
Okay.
And she's got one of those in her shirt. It's like a hands-free something or other.
Yeah. It's like a willow or something, I think. And it's like, you know what? The idea behind it is great. And we're making life easier for mothers who are so busy and who can't be home with their baby and really want to leave breast milk. And it's great. Like we should try to make that easier. But do we really need a pump that you can drive your car and pump at the same time? Like, do we have to multitask like that? Is it real? Is that the message we're sending to women that in order to be this successful to breastfeed your child, you have to be able to pump while you're driving and doing other things?
Well, and I think that's a really good point. And that's where this misinformation is born, right?
Right.
It's like all I see is nothing but like ads for pumps and these pumps of people pumping at work and pumping in their car and pumping, while doing gymnastics. And, it's like, well, okay, then I have to have one of those. She's a breastfeeding mom. Then you have to have one. And I mean, there's, it's like, great. We live in America, a capitalist nation, free market is great. But it's also, we're bombarded with advertising all the time in a very, very extreme way that I don't think we even realize.
Oh my God, it's crazy.
And so and it's not like this anywhere else in the world. It's this country with the advertising, and it really sends them. We pick up the wrong messages. Mm-hmm. We just feel like there's we start to understand like, well, we need to have this.
Right. I got to do it. I got to be able to pump. And I mean, I know this, especially like the generation now. There's a lot of anxiety there. And their biggest, a lot of them will come to breastfeeding class and they don't really care about what's going to happen in the hospital. They just want to be like, well, when can I start pumping? Because I have to go back to work. And it's a very real issue. Yeah. But if we pump too soon, that can just cause way too many problems. And oversupply is seriously a problem. It's a problem. I hate oversupply. And it's so hard because then it's like, there's only, few things you can do, but when you're so full and uncomfortable, you want to get that milk out, so you just want to pump it more. So that's right. What a lot of women think they need to do is, well, if I'm really uncomfortable, so I pumped. Or when they get engorged, when the milk first starts coming in and you're really full and uncomfortable, women will just pump because they're like, well, I'll just pump because I can get that milk out and it's more comfortable. That's too much stimulation. We need to let your body just kind of get used to what it's supposed to be doing on its own. Icing and, feeding the baby as frequently as you can. Those are things that would really help the situation. But letting your baby sleep a little bit longer and pumping because you feel too full is not really the best solution because you are risking oversupply with that.
Right. And then, your body picks up and your body picks up that there's more milk leaving. So we need to make more milk.
Exactly. Yes. So with oversupply too, so now you've got, like I said, you've got moms that can be full and uncomfortable and leaking and more pumping. and babies that are uncomfortable. But this is where you get like that foremilk, hindmilk imbalance is with oversupply. Now, foremilk, hindmilk, that is such a like, I don't even know what to say about it, because there's so many people out there like, well, how long do I keep the baby on so they can get the hind milk and the foremilk? Like how does that work? And the baby has to feed this much time, but the baby's only on for 5 minutes. Are they getting the hind milk? And what about the foremilk? Blah, blah, blah. Do you get questions on that a lot?
Yes. Yes.
It is such a confusing point for people.
Yeah. And I feel like there's also a little bit of controversy around this too, whether there's actually something to worry about.
Right. And there really is not anything to worry about unless you have an oversupply problem. So what happens is with foremilk and hind milk, now your breast, when the milk lets down, you're going to have milk that's a little bit more watery, and that is called your foremilk. So the milk lets down, and that's what the baby's getting when they first start to feed with that feeding. Getting it as the milk's traveling through the breast to the baby, it's picking up fat along the way and getting thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker as it's coming. So if you have an oversupply issue and the baby can only like handle being on one breast for a few minutes because there's so much milk there and they're gulping this milk down, they're not able to get there. So that's where you get that imbalance.
So it is a concern with oversupply. There really is a true foremilk concern.
Right. Absolutely. And then if that's the problem, what happens, like I was saying earlier, like the baby will that foremilk is very high in sugar. So they're going to digest it really quickly. It's going to cause irritation to their intestines. They might get like the green poop and the blood in the stool a little bit because it's irritating to their gut. They might want to feed all the time because it digested so quickly that they're not really staying full because they don't have that good thick hind milk. So it's definitely an imbalance problem, but that comes from oversupply. For babies that moms think, oh, well, the baby, because babies become so efficient as they learn to breastfeed. And then some moms get worried, like, is the baby on long enough to get the hind milk? If your baby is efficient enough to be on the breast and feed and get off, they're getting what they need and they can get to that hind milk as quickly as they need to. There is no time limit. There is no like, okay, you have to be on a certain amount of minutes before the baby hits the hind milk. It's not like a door closes and another one opens and they let the hind milk out. Like it's just, the baby, if they're eating fast enough and they're eating efficiently, they're going to get what they need to get. But with the oversupply, you have too much of one thing. So that's what they're getting. They're getting a lot of that first milk. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we say to do. Yeah,
so now we have to get into what do we do? What do we do? All the people with oversupply out there are like, what in the world do I do?
Stop talking about the symptoms. We know what they are. It's tricky. It really is, because depending on how your body reacts to it and all that stuff. First of all, we stop pumping unless we absolutely have to pump, and meaning you're separated from the baby. And we sometimes will initiate block feeding. And there is a little bit of controversy around this too, because we don't want moms to get plugged ducts on the other side, but block feeding can help. So sometimes we'll start that a little bit slowly. And block feeding is where you feed only on one breast per feeding. And sometimes people just do that automatically because their baby gets full enough on one breast. And some babies are always two breastfeeders. It just depends on your kid. I mean, mine were always like one breast at a time feeders. I do remember that pretty closely, that they were always one. And then I've had some moms whose babies just, didn't matter. But if you have an oversupply and you are feeding on both breasts, then the baby's getting lots of foremilk on one breast, lots of foremilk on the other breast. Right. So we want the baby to stay on one breast for that whole feeding. If they pull off, they doze off, you won't take them off, burp them, whatever, put them back on that same side and just let them feed only on that breast. If it's still not helping, and sometimes, we want that quick fix too. And it can take a few days for your body to kind of start slowing things down a little bit, but that will help to slow your supply down and get it a little bit more under control.
And so what we're trying to do is to stop expressing so much milk from the breast so that your body gets the idea that it doesn't need to make all of that milk.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Yes. So if that doesn't work, if it's an oversupply issue enough that mom's doing block feeding, or maybe she's already block feeding and it's still a crazy oversupply issue, then we might do longer blocks. We might stretch it into longer blocks. So that might be like, okay, is your baby cluster feeding and feeding, maybe a certain time of day, they're feeding once every hour. Keep them on that same breast for like a 3-hour time period. And every time in that 3 hours they want to eat, keep putting them on one. So they keep draining that same breast, keep draining. Otherwise, if they're just like every 3-hour feeders or whatever, then just, pop them on the other side. But very close cluster feeding, keep them on the same breast so they can drain it.
Okay. And so then we have one breast that's full.
Right. One breast that's full. Should she stay full? Because I feel like then we're risking the mastitis and the clogged ducts. How do we keep that from happening? Can we keep that from happening? What I have seen some moms do, which really does help you can do some hand expressing, because that is less stimulating than the pumping. And it's not less stimulating necessarily, but you can control that a little bit better.
You're not going to take out as much milk.
Right.
You might take off just as much as will relieve some discomfort.
Right.
Like don't drain your whole breast. Just take enough out to become comfortable again.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
Just enough to be comfortable. There's this pump out there now. It's called like a Haka pump, where it just kind of, Milkies. Those are another one. I know I'm totally giving free advertising, but and those are great because it'll catch the letdown. So if you're feeding baby on one side and you have something on the other breast that encourages the milk, if the milk's letting down, just to kind of catch that milk, then you won't feel as full after, because that milk is getting a way out. And that's good, because it's not like stimulating your body to make more. It's just getting a little bit out as your body's letting down.
Okay.
So that can help a lot too. Completely skipping feeds is not a good idea because of the whole block duct thing and mastitis and stuff.
And your baby needs to eat.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't just
you can't just be like, no, I'm not going to do it. They said that I need to not stimulate. No,
right?
Yeah,
no,
definitely
feed your baby.
But it's definitely, it can take a process. It can take a little bit of time for your body to kind of go, okay, this is working or this is not working. At about the 3-month mark or so, your body really starts settling in well. And a lot of moms that have been struggling with oversupply find that things are starting to even out a little bit. So this is really a big problem with those newborns and first month.
I feel like that's another thing too. Like when you're in the newborn days, you forget that one day you won't have a newborn. And if you have a newborn, your first newborn, you have no idea what that means. Like you can't see into the future. Like, it just feels permanent.
Right.
It's like you've never been here. You've never been a parent. You've never had a baby. And so whatever you're going through feels like that's what you're going to be going through the rest of your life.
Right.
But there will be, after the few months, things will even out. And people don't have oversupply when they're like feeding a 4-year-old.
Oh, no, they don't. But the other thing is, if it's your first baby.
And yes, you can feed a 4-year-old.
You can. Absolutely. If it's your first baby, you might not even realize what oversupply is or what it feels like. You might think that everybody has this.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you'll get a lot more spitting up and a lot of reflux because those babies are gaining a ton. And that's one of the things I like to look at. If moms say, oh, I think I've got an oversupply or, whatever. Or if they tell me like the doctor said the baby's got a dairy allergy and I need to get off dairy. I'll ask like, well, what are the weights of the baby? Because if that baby is jumping up like crazy, then that's telling me she's got an oversupply. And it can look different for every baby, obviously, but you're going to get more reflux symptoms because they're more full. You're going to get more spitting up. You're going to get like, if they're gulping a lot with the heavy letdown, you're going to get more air going in. You're going to get more spitting up that way too. Sometimes those babies are just really uncomfortable. One of the other things that you can do is you can adjust your positioning. So if you are laying down, that just naturally helps to slow the flow of milk. If you are reclined back, like, you can like sit on the couch or sit on your bed and then just lay back once the baby's on, that will help to slow the flow of milk too. So that would make it a little bit easier for the baby not choking when you're having that overactive letdown.
Mm-hmm.
And then just keep the baby on that one side for the feed.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard because it does even out. But I mean, if you're just laying down for every feeding, I mean, what are you going to do? Lay down in the middle of a Starbucks and feed your baby? I mean, you can't really, that's hard. So just when you're home and you can do that, then great, because it'll make everything more comfortable for everybody. But if you're out, then you're not going to be able to do that as much.
Yeah.
And talk to a lactation consultant. This is definitely not, this is one of those things where it's like, all right, you really need to talk to somebody and get some guidance with it, because it can lead to plugged ducts, mastitis, discomfort, like lots of stuff happening. And we don't want that.
No, that's horrible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's why understanding, I think, the oversupply stuff. Because again, you're right. People might be getting recurring mastitis and not realize that this is why.
Right.
They're like, I'm just plagued with mastitis. Okay, well, let's try to figure out why.
Right. Because you should not be plagued with mastitis.
You shouldn't.
Nobody should be getting mastitis all the time.
No, and if you are, something's wrong. Something's not wrong with you. It's just there's a reason. And if you talk to a lactation consultant, get some guidance, you can stop that from happening.
Right. But you shouldn't be uncomfortable. And like breastfeeding should be comfortable. Like once you get into your groove, the first couple weeks suck. We all know that. But once you get into your groove, like it should be comfortable. And supply is very individualized, so if your friend says, oh, I've got, I pump 18 ounces every time I pump, like that's not normal. Like don't want to do that. You don't want to have to do that. You should have what your baby needs. That's really what you should have. And people are under this impression that they should have an overabundance of what the baby needs. And they don't need that.
Right. And that we've talked about this before. We just talked about this, I don't remember, a couple episodes ago. That we post a lot on social media, and we celebrate these moms that are filling these deep freezers with milk, and they're donating tons of milk to like NICUs and stuff. And it's a beautiful thing, except that's not normal.
Right.
That is oversupply. That is a problem that somebody has, decided that they're just going to, keep going with. And that's great. Thank you. Thank you to those moms who can do that. But then you get this feeling that you're not making enough milk, and
you got to do more.
And that you have to pump more, and that the amount of milk that you need for your baby is going to be less than you think.
It is.
People say, well, when I pump, I only get 3 ounces of milk. Girl, that is a good amount of milk to get. That is fantastic. That's how much milk you need. That's a lot.
It is. And it's so funny because moms will be like, I'm only getting this much. I've had moms actually say, I'm only getting 10 ounces. Or I'm only getting 6 ounces. I'm only getting, 4 ounces. I'm like, your baby, if you were going to go breastfeed your baby right now, they would not take 6 ounces.
No, you cannot. No, and you're not going to get, right, you're not going to pump a full day's worth of milk for your baby in one session.
No.
Like, it's just not going to happen. It's not normal to pump more than that.
And you shouldn't. And we don't want you to.
And you're not going to feel all full of milk and have milk squirting out everywhere. Like that, again, that's not normal. And that's not what a full milk supply feels like.
Mm-mm. No.
Your full milk supply, you might have bigger breasts than you did before you had kids, but it's not going to be, you're not going to have Dolly Partons.
No, absolutely not. And you should be comfortable. You should be able to go through life comfortable, and which is the bottom line. The other thing, like, can we talk for a second again about the pumping thing when you get home from the hospital, and how much stuff do you really want to have to do when you get home from the hospital? Like, please, ladies, in the first 2 weeks of your baby's life, if you don't need to do anything, do not do anything. But lay there and feed your baby, and go to the random doctor appointment and have your lactation consultant come and visit you. Like, I don't care. Like, if you have other kids, like, that's a different story. But if this is your first baby, I can never imagine why a new mother wants to come home from the hospital and pump while she's got this newborn.
It's all rooted in anxiety.
It is.
It's rooted in the fear that you're not making enough, that you're not going to make. You don't even have the baby. You know, you're just new to this. Mm-hmm. It's all around the fear of not having enough milk, of not having enough in the freezer, of not being prepared enough. It's all rooted in fear.
It is.
And it's totally normal to feel that way. But that's why we're here. This is why we're talking about this, because we want you to know that you don't need to do that. And you shouldn't do that, because you're going to end up with problems.
Right. And it's not worth it. So, I mean, if you're feeling like that, if you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I need to have more, just, talk to us about it. Or you could send us a message, reach out to us, whatever, because we can kind of help talk you through that and at least give you the signs of what to watch for. Because if you go to your doctor with a fussy baby, they might tell you, go off dairy, go off soy, your baby's got problems, start on Nutramigen, whatever, they'll give you all this kind of song and dance because they don't realize that it's an oversupply problem.
Yeah.
So we want you to have the information so that you can arm yourself with this, and it can be fixed. We can fix it. But stop the stimulation. No more stimulating.
Yep. All right. Well, send us. Yeah. Let us know if you're having issues.
Definitely. And I know some, like we said, some people have already messaged us, which is why we were talking about this. And we should have talked about it a long time ago, because it really is. I swear it's more of an issue now than I've seen in the last few years. So I really think it's kind of coming out, that anxiety. And I think it's starting in the hospitals a little earlier than it needs to be. But so just kind of, if your baby's feeding well, don't worry about pumping.
Yep. Okay, good.
And we'll be back next week with another very exciting and stimulating topic.
Yeah, no pun intended.
Yeah, no pun intended.
Bye.
Bye.